Imagine walking through a forest 50,000 years ago. You're not alone, but the other people you might meet don't quite look like you. Their bodies are shorter, stronger. Their brows are heavier, their eyes deep set. They are not animals. They are not monsters. They are human, just not like us. They are Neanderthals, and yet, today, only we remain. Why? Introduction. Setting the question. For over 99% of human history, we shared the earth with other types of humans. Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia, and others now long gone. So the big question is, why are Homo sapiens, the species we belong to, the only ones left? Was it because we were smarter, more violent, luckier? Or is there a deeper, more surprising answer? Main body. Part 1. Who were the Neanderthals? Neanderthals were not the brutish cave dwellers they were once made out to be. They had culture, they buried their dead, they crafted tools, they even wore jewelry. Their brains were as big as ours, sometimes even bigger. They survived brutal ice ages, hunted mammoths, and lived in close-knit communities for hundreds of thousands of years across Europe and Western Asia. They were, without question, human. Main body. Part 2. The arrival of us around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, began migrating out of Africa. When we arrived in Europe and Asia, we didn't find an empty land. We found them, the Neanderthals. What happened next? That's the mystery. Some researchers believe it was competition. We may have had better tools, better clothing, or more complex language that allowed us to organize in larger groups. Others suggest that climate change weakened Neanderthal populations, and our arrival was the final blow. And there's another possibility, interbreeding. Today, many of us carry 1-2% Neanderthal DNA. That means they didn't just vanish, they became a part of us. Main body. Part 3. What set us apart? So what gave us the edge? It wasn't brute strength. They had more of that. It wasn't brain size that was roughly equal. It may have been our ability to cooperate in larger groups, build more complex social networks, and adapt more quickly to change. Some scientists call this the cognitive revolution. We may have told stories, shared myths, created culture that bound us together in bigger tribes, and that togetherness may have been the secret to our survival. Conclusion. Reflecting on our legacy. So why are we the only humans left? Maybe it's because we were better at being human together. But let's not forget, the Neanderthals were not a failure. They thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. Their story is not one of extinction alone, but of legacy. They live on in our genes and in our story. And as we face our own modern challenges, from climate to conflict, we'd be wise to remember, survival doesn't come from strength alone. It comes from community, creativity, and compassion. Neanderthals were not the primitive, unintelligent beings they were once portrayed as. For much of the 20th century, they were dismissed as brutish, hunched cavemen, an inferior species destined to die out. But recent archaeological and genetic discoveries have shattered that myth. In truth, Neanderthals were highly intelligent, resourceful, and deeply human in their behavior. They lived across vast regions of Europe and parts of Asia for over 300,000 years, an astonishing time span, far longer than modern humans have existed. During that time, they developed a rich culture and a sophisticated way of life suited to harsh Ice Age environments. Their tools were advanced and diverse, made from stone, bone, and wood, showing technical knowledge and planning. They hunted large animals in coordinated groups, used fire, built shelters, and adapted to a wide range of climates. Evidence shows they created symbolic objects, pierced animal teeth, ochre pigments, and carved bones, indicating an understanding of art, symbolism, and perhaps even spiritual ideas. They likely had language or some form of complex communication, though we'll never know exactly what it sounded like. Some of their caves even contain what appear to be primitive forms of art, painted stalagmites, carefully arranged circles of stones, and burial sites with ritual significance. One of the most powerful testaments to their humanity is how they treated their dead. Graves with deliberate placement of bones, sometimes accompanied by flowers or tools, suggest a sense of ritual or belief in something beyond death. They cared for injured or elderly group members, showing empathy and social bonds. In one case, scientists discovered the skeleton of a Neanderthal who had survived many years despite severe disabilities, which could only have happened with the support of others. Genetically, Neanderthals were so similar to us that interbreeding occurred. Today, most people outside Africa carry between 1% and 2% Neanderthal DNA. This genetic legacy influences everything from our immune systems to skin tone, and it proves we are not as separate from Neanderthals as once thought. They were not a failed species, they were a different branch of the human family tree. The divide between us and them is not nearly as wide as we used to believe. Their intelligence, culture, and resilience deserve recognition not as an evolutionary footnote, but as a vital part of our shared human history. Modern humans and Neanderthals coexisted on Earth for thousands of years, sharing landscapes, climates, and in some cases, even shelters. When Homo sapiens began migrating out of Africa around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, they eventually encountered Neanderthals who had already been living in Europe and parts of Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. These encounters were not always hostile or competitive. In fact, genetic and archaeological evidence now shows that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals interacted in complex, meaningful ways, including interbreeding. This interbreeding left a lasting mark. Today, nearly all people of non-African descent carry between 1% and 2% Neanderthal DNA. That may seem like a small amount, but it's a significant discovery that rewrote our understanding of human evolution. It means the Neanderthals didn't simply vanish or get wiped out. They were, in part, absorbed into our lineage. Their genes continue to live within us, influencing various biological traits such as skin pigmentation, immune response, fat metabolism, and even sleep patterns. Some research even links Neanderthal DNA to certain modern health conditions, including allergies and depression. Fossil discoveries support this genetic evidence. In sites across Europe and Asia, archaeologists have uncovered bones and tools from both Neanderthals and Homo sapiens in close proximity, sometimes within the same cave systems. This suggests overlapping timelines and possibly even shared living spaces. Additionally, recent discoveries of hybrid fossils, individuals whose features combine traits of both species, give us direct evidence of cross-species offspring. These hybrids confirm that our ancestors didn't just replace Neanderthals. In many cases, they mingled and formed families with them. The complexity of these interactions challenges the long-standing narrative of a violent or purely competitive relationship between the two species. While conflict may have occurred at times, it's now clear that cooperation, coexistence, and social blending were also part of the story. Interbreeding would have required not just physical proximity, but social and emotional connections. This implies that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens saw one another not as entirely alien, but as similar enough to relate to, live with, and reproduce with. It's a profound reminder that the boundaries we draw between different kinds of humans are not always as rigid or meaningful as we once assumed. Homo sapiens held a unique advantage that may have made all the difference in our survival: the ability to build complex social structures and adapt rapidly to changing environments. Unlike Neanderthals, who tended to live in smaller, family-based groups, modern humans formed larger, more interconnected communities. This allowed for a more efficient sharing of resources, knowledge, and innovation. When a member of one group learned a new technique or discovered a better hunting strategy, that knowledge could spread quickly across different groups, strengthening the entire network. This capacity for collaboration and collective learning gave Homo sapiens a remarkable edge, especially in challenging climates and unfamiliar landscapes. Our species also demonstrated a high degree of behavioral flexibility. While Neanderthals excelled in adapting to cold European climates, Homo sapiens proved to be generalists. We were able to thrive in a wider range of environments, from savannas to tundras to dense forests. This adaptability was likely enhanced by our ability to innovate and experiment with new tools, techniques, and strategies. Evidence shows that Homo sapiens used a greater variety of materials such as bone, antler, and ivory, to create tools that were more specialized and efficient than those used by Neanderthals. Our ancestors also developed better clothing and more advanced shelter systems, which helped them survive in colder regions previously dominated by Neanderthals. One of the most striking differences was our capacity for symbolic thought and communication. Early Homo sapiens created cave art, figurines, musical instruments, and intricate jewelry, all pointing to a rich cultural and spiritual life. This symbolic behavior likely strengthened group identity and cohesion, making large-scale cooperation more effective. Language may have played a crucial role in this process. While Neanderthals probably had some form of speech, Homo sapiens seem to have had more complex and nuanced language abilities, allowing them to share ideas, build alliances, and plan for the future with greater precision. This cultural and cognitive flexibility allowed Homo sapiens to respond swiftly to shifting conditions, including environmental changes and interactions with other hominin species. We were not necessarily stronger or even smarter in a biological sense than Neanderthals, but our ability to innovate, communicate, and connect gave us a powerful survival advantage. These qualities helped us explore new frontiers, build larger social networks, and ultimately outlast all other human species with whom we once shared the earth. The disappearance of the Neanderthals is not easily explained by a single cause. Instead, most researchers today agree that it was likely the result of a complex mix of factors, including climate change, competition with Homo sapiens, and interbreeding. Neanderthals had successfully adapted to Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, but the climate during their final millennia became increasingly unstable. Rapid environmental shifts disrupted ecosystems, reduced the availability of large game animals, and forced populations to migrate or adapt quickly. While Neanderthals were resilient, these abrupt changes placed significant stress on their food sources, living conditions, and ability to survive in fragmented habitats. At the same time, modern humans began expanding into Neanderthal territories. This migration introduced a new competitor that may have been more efficient at hunting, organizing in larger groups, and exploiting resources. Homo sapiens likely had more diversified diets and a broader set of tools, giving them greater flexibility in difficult conditions. This overlap would have created direct competition for food, shelter, and territory. In areas where resources were already strained by environmental pressures, this competition could have been especially intense, gradually weakening Neanderthal populations. However, the story is not one of simple conflict and replacement. Genetic studies reveal that interbreeding occurred between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals at multiple points in time and across different regions. This means that some Neanderthal communities did not vanish entirely but were genetically absorbed into the expanding human population. Rather than being wiped out, they were in part integrated. Their genes still exist in many people alive today, influencing various aspects of our biology. This absorption further complicates the idea of Neanderthal extinction, showing it was not just a disappearance but also a merging. Disease transmission may have also played a role. As Homo sapiens entered new regions, they may have carried pathogens that Neanderthals had never encountered and were unable to resist. This factor, though hard to prove definitively, is supported by parallels in more recent human history when isolated populations encountered foreign diseases with devastating consequences. Ultimately, the decline of the Neanderthals was likely the result of multiple overlapping pressures that unfolded over thousands of years. No single event or characteristic sealed their fate. Instead, it was a slow erosion of stability, intensified by climate stress, resource competition, and genetic mixing, that gradually reduced their distinct populations until they were no longer a separate species. The long-term survival of Homo sapiens was not determined by physical strength, but by our ability to form strong social bonds, share knowledge, and cooperate across large and diverse groups. While Neanderthals were physically robust and well-suited to endure harsh environments, modern humans developed a different kind of strength, one rooted in communication, empathy, and cultural expression. This social intelligence allowed Homo sapiens to build extensive networks of cooperation, enabling groups to support one another, trade tools and ideas, and respond collectively to challenges in ways no other human species could match. Anthropological evidence suggests that Homo sapiens developed systems of reciprocity and mutual support that allowed for shared childcare, food distribution, and conflict resolution. These social practices helped create more resilient communities, where survival did not depend solely on the individual or immediate family, but on a broader group structure. In difficult times, this web of relationships provided security, ensuring that the sick, injured, or elderly could still receive care and contribute to society in non-physical ways. This collective resilience would have given Homo sapiens a major advantage during periods of ecological stress or migration into unfamiliar territories. Communication was also central to this success. Our species likely possessed a more flexible and expressive language system than Neanderthals, allowing for the transmission of complex ideas, oral histories, and instructions. This capacity for storytelling and teaching would have enabled humans to pass down survival strategies, cultural norms, and moral frameworks from one generation to the next. It fostered group identity, reinforced cooperation, and allowed communities to grow in size and sophistication. Art, music, and ritual practices further deepened these social connections. Early Homo sapiens painted cave walls, crafted symbolic objects, and created ceremonial spaces, reflecting not only creativity, but also shared belief systems that brought people together. These expressions helped strengthen bonds and build trust among unrelated individuals, laying the foundation for larger, more organized societies. While Neanderthals likely had strong family ties and close social groups, their networks appear to have been smaller and more isolated. In contrast, Homo sapiens developed the ability to maintain relationships over long distances and connect across different groups. This expansive social fabric enabled information to flow, alliances to form, and adaptive strategies to spread more quickly, giving our species the tools to survive and eventually dominate a changing world.